day 496 of the Trump administration, and we have breaking news that raises new questions about the circumstances surrounding this president's firing of former FBI Director James Comey. This was May of last year. The report comes from the New York Times. One of the co-authors, Matt Apuzzo, standing by to join us. The Times tells it this way, quote, former acting FBI Director Andrew G. McCabe wrote a confidential memo last spring recounting a conversation that offered significant behind-the-scenes details on the firing of Mr. McCabe's predecessor, James Comey, according to several people familiar with the discussion. In the document, whose contents have not been previously reported, Mr. McCabe described a conversation at the Justice Department with the Deputy Attorney General, Rod J. Rosenstein, in the chaotic days last May after Mr. Comey's abrupt firing. Mr. Rosenstein played a key role in the dismissal, writing a memo that rebuked Mr. Comey over his handling of an investigation into Hillary Clinton. But in the meeting at the Justice Department, Mr. Rosenstein added a new detail. He said the president had originally asked him to reference Russia in his memo. The people familiar with the conversation said. The Times adds McCabe has turned over his memo to special counsel Robert Mueller. You may recall Andrew McCabe was the focus of relentless attacks, personal attacks from President Trump as part of his strategy to discredit the Russia investigation. McCabe was fired in March after an internal investigation at the Bureau. In response to his firing, McCabe issued a statement saying, in part, quote, I am being singled out and treated this way because of the role I played, the actions I took, and this is important, the events I witnessed in the aftermath of the firing of James Comey. The release of this report was accelerated only after my testimony to the House Intelligence Committee revealed that I would corroborate former Director Comey's accounts of his discussions with the president. Well, also tonight, there is mounting tension between Trump and his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. Sessions was at the White House today. There he is exiting. So far, no information on why he was there or who he met with. A New York Times report says the president, who had been stewing over Sessions' decision to recuse himself from the entire Russia investigation, had asked, indeed, that Sessions reverse that decision and get re-involved. Well, earlier today, retiring Republican Congressman Trey Gowdy offered up this explanation for President Trump's thinking.
If I were the president and I picked someone to be the country's chief law enforcement officer and they told me later, oh, by the way, I'm not going to be able to participate in the most important case in the office, I would be frustrated, too. That's how I read that is Senator Sessions, why didn't you tell me this before I picked you? There are lots of really good lawyers in the country. He could have picked someone else.
Well, guess who was watching? The president clearly agreed with that. Shortly after the interview, he sent several messages on Twitter directly quoting Trey Gowdy and ended with, and I wish I did, meaning he wishes he'd chosen someone else as his AG. The president's main spokesman for his legal effort on all things Russia had an update today on a potential Trump-Mueller sit-down interview. Rudy Giuliani telling NBC News he's doing practice Q&A sessions with the president evenings during the week as negotiations for a sit-down continue. And Giuliani also laid down something of a deadline for the special counsel.
People should have an answer, even if they they put together whatever the heck they have, interview or no interview. By September 1st, the public should have an explanation of what Mueller has. I really want that because I don't think he has much.
Rudy Giuliani, along with the president and his allies, are trying to sow doubt about the investigation by talking up the idea that the FBI planted a spy in the campaign, maybe more than one, but certainly a history-making infiltration of the campaign. And there, of course, is zero proof of any of that. Just a few hours ago, Giuliani was out talking again, this time insisting the Trump legal team see documents related to the FBI Russia inquiry before any decisions are made about an interview.
I'm not going to let my client testify, the President of the United States, even if he wants to, without those documents being produced, if and when we find that this was handled appropriately, and there's some evidence on which they could base this phony investigation, will we have him testify? But you got a group there that's a lynching mob, so let them do their job, and boy, we're ready to knock the heck out of you with our report.
On that note, let's bring in our leadoff panel for a Wednesday evening. Robert Costa, national political reporter for The Washington Post, moderator of Washington Week on PBS. Shannon Pettypiece, White House correspondent for Bloomberg. And the aforementioned Matt Apuzzo, two-time Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter with The New York Times, and we might add, among the emerging stars of the new journalistically addictive series, The Fourth Estate, a year in the life of The New York Times, presently airing on Showtime. And Matt, I'll begin with you, not just because of your star turn on that series, but because of what you've published tonight. Talk about your reporting and, more specifically, Andrew McCabe's possible fears in real time of what it was he was witnessing. And it turns out he foreshadowed this in his resignation.
Absolutely. And of course, if you go back to last year in the aftermath of the Comey firing, the White House was pointing to this memo by Rod Rosenstein saying, look, this is all about Comey's handling of the Clinton investigation. He wasn't fair to Hillary Clinton. He was talking too publicly about an ongoing investigation, and that's out of line. And that was the official White House line for about 24 hours. And then, of course, the president went on NBC News and talked to Lester Holt and said, well, you know, I had already made up my mind even before I saw that memo, and I was thinking about Russia and what a phony made-up thing that was. And if you have that as your backdrop, and McCabe goes into this meeting at the Justice Department. It's a crowded meeting, and Rosenstein is telling his version of the story, and he says, well, as a matter of fact, the president originally asked me to mention Russia in the memo, but I didn't think that was a good idea, and I didn't do that. So to McCabe, as we understand it, the memo was there to write down, like, hey, this may not have actually been about Hillary Clinton. There may have been some Russia interest going on here. And I think that this firing of Jim Comey and the question of what was the president's intent in firing Jim Comey is at the heart of what Bob Mueller is still looking at right now.
So, Matt, I can't quite tell without a whiteboard, where does this leave Rod Rosenstein vis-a-vis the Trump administration? Is he in fashion, out of fashion, or same?
You know, it's funny. I think he's same in terms of where he stands with the president. But what's interesting is our reporting shows that the president's lawyers are actually pointing to Rod Rosenstein in their own defense now, saying there's no way that we could have been trying to obstruct justice because, look, Rod Rosenstein agreed with us that Comey needed to go. And so now you've got the deputy attorney general who is supervising an investigation into the president. The president is pointing at Rod Rosenstein as evidence that he's innocent, and Rod Rosenstein may be the one to decide whether that argument has merit.
Wow.
So a lot of circular arrows going on.
Shannon, because perhaps it originated, it aired from this building, because people regard it as the original sin, and because it's right there on video, I want to show you and our audience just one more time the president on why he fired Comey, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
I was going to fire regardless of recommendation.
So there was really
he made a recommendation. He's highly respected, very good guy, very smart guy. The Democrats like him. The Republicans like him. He made a recommendation. But regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story.
Well, there you have it, Shannon, this Russia thing, and that continues to haunt and bedevil this West Wing.
There is a lot of concern right now around this obstruction investigation based on our reporting and what we're hearing from people close to the president, that there could really be a risk of obstruction here, and not necessarily obstruction in a criminal sense, because there is this issue of you can't indict a sitting president according to Justice Department guidelines, but obstruction in an impeachment sense, because you get into interpretation, you get into intent. If you're talking about impeachment, you get into high crimes and misdemeanors, which is a fudgy term. So there is actually really concern right now that we are hearing, and I feel like I'm hearing it increasingly, that there might really be something to this obstruction investigation. And to Matt's point about Rosenstein, I'm hearing that more and more from the president's allies, that Rosenstein has actually become a key witness that, oh, no, this wasn't about Russia. This was about everything else, because there was this meeting at the White House and so many issues with Comey was discussed and Rosenstein was there. Yet Rosenstein has overseen this investigation. So there's a conflict. And maybe at some point they can, the president's attorneys can raise an issue that, well, he is conflicted here because he was a witness and now he's overseeing the investigation, and maybe find that as a way to funnel him out. So I still think really keep our eye on Rosenstein, and I think really keep our ear out for anything in obstruction. I feel like those two threads are starting to pick up a lot right now.
Hey, Bob, add to this vis-a-vis your reporting what we've just heard, this kind of slow motion car crash, the length of Washington, D.C. and the mall.
When you look at the president's relationship with Attorney General Jeff Sessions, this whole precedent with James Comey and the firing in 2017 hangs over the current situation with the AG. You have the president being advised to not fire Sessions, to not risk any kind of obstruction question at this point, but he's made it clear to the Attorney General privately he'd like to see him gone or to resign. Now it's moved more publicly, and it's been public in the past, trying to push the AG out of office, and they're trying to avoid the president forcing him out of office. But the president's frustrations are growing daily because Giuliani and others are saying to him, you need to have an attorney general, chief law enforcement officer of this country, who can have some kind of role in the biggest issue facing your presidency, which is the Mueller investigation. They don't care that this is the attorney general's dream job. They don't care about his efforts anymore at the White House and immigration. They know he's in line with the president ideologically, but they want a defender on the probe.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.